listening to Maria's work in progress and talking about the story that she tells in her book and that she's lived through. Um, I'm just so thrilled to introduce the one and only Maria Breaux. Uh, she'll be reading from and discussing her memoir in progress, Compassion Guy, tonight. Maria Breaux is an accomplished writer and filmmaker based here in San Francisco. She grew up in Duarte, California, east of East Pasadena, and was the first in the history of Duarte, we've established before, uh, verified this, to attend and graduate from Stanford University, where she majored in English literature and creative writing, and where some of us in this audience, including myself, first happily came to know her. Her films have included the prize-winning short Lucha, set in the Salvadoran Civil War, the prize-winning feature Mother Country, about an unwilling criminal on the run, and the prize-winning improvised mockumentary Volvita, about the reunion, yes, Volvita, about the reunion of a girl power band 20 years after its heyday. And you'll note that repeated adjective, prize-winning, follows everything that she does. In all these films, Maria served as both writer and director, and in Volvita, she was starring actor as well. Tonight, we're going to be discussing the book she's currently writing, Compassion Guy, which centers on the life and death of her brother David, and which takes us from Maria's shared childhood with David in Duarte through David's decision to abandon a straightforward career track and live a life focused on the lessons of compassion. And then from there, she goes into a darker set of episodes, David's tragic killing in Davis, and the courtroom trial, which she attended, that aimed to mete out justice for the crime as the courts see it. It's an incredibly multidimensional story, both wise and energized by Maria's considerable wit. Ever since I've known Maria, she has been an incredible comic presence, and she brings that incredible comic sensibility to even to like very difficult stories. It's really incredible. I'm honored to be discussing Compassion Guy with her tonight. So please join me in welcoming Maria Breaux. All right. And the way this is going to work, Maria's going to read for I think 2 excerpts from the start of the book. Introduce it however you want, obviously, and then I have a few questions prepared. But after that, it's going to go to you guys for the Q&A. So think about questions as she's reading.
Thank you. Wow, I want you to introduce me always from now on, everywhere. Thank you for that, and thanks for everyone for being here. I really had no idea who was going to show up, so I really appreciate you taking time out of your Wednesday evening to hear Memoir in Progress with DIY binding, because a lot of what we do in the creative world is DIY, and this is no exception. So I will just jump right in. 2 chapters from Compassion Guy, a memoir in progress. Strange Behavior, 1971. From across the street, the first thing you might notice is the trim green lawn. Or maybe the white aluminum siding that slants against rainstorms like a thin, angled umbrella. On some days, it might be the cumulus cloud formations that explode above the San Gabriel Mountains, 5 miles in the distance and marking the outer limits of the narrow foothills. As night approaches, the clouds drift and disperse. Another day's work done. Sounds take their place. Crickets in hiding, the hum and slow drag of station wagons and pickup trucks pulling into driveways, the swish of work shoes on grass, and the slam of screen doors as the people disappear into small, 1-story houses. The buzz of TV news drifts through open windows. It's warm out, but front yard trees and rose bushes bring cool to this simple but well-kept neighborhood. This is how things appear on the surface. Inside the house, I'm 2 years old and sitting on the couch with my father. He's tall, thin, and mixed race, an expat from Jim Crow, Louisiana, and the Great Migration, his lighter skin allowing him to pass for white. I'm on his left side, his arm curved around me in a barricade, his right arm another parapet in the same fortress, keeping my older brother Joe close, me with short brown ringlets, Joe 5 years old with oil-straightened black hair, sucking his thumb as he'd do until he's 12. Our father is upright and on guard as my mother stands across from us in the boxy space designated as a dining room. She's squat and caramel-colored, not the deeper brown of her days in Jamaica before she came to California for an arranged marriage with a man who reminds her of her brothers. She seems calmer than she actually is, in a long housecoat with big flower prints, her body framed by the brown table next to her, and the dark wood glass front cabinet behind her filled with clean, cheap china. She's expressing a single wish. She wants to kill me and my brother Joe. The words seem too loud. I wonder if the neighbors can hear. I feel shame and fear. As I burrow into the safety of my father's chest, our hearts beat together in a strange syncopation. I peek to study my mother's face and composure. She's wide-eyed and short of breath, and although I can't find any object she might take up to harm us, her transformed expression itself feels like an assault. I'm too young to understand what's happening. Do I love this person? Or am I afraid of her? Or both? My father reasons with her until she calms down. This is the first time I see my mother acting this way. I don't know what it's called yet, but her condition will play an outsized role in the next 20 years at 443 East Road in Duarte, California. A couple of years later, on Monday, February 26, 1973, my little brother is born. My parents name him David Henry. Schizophrenia, as we come to recognize and name it in my mother, will lead to a stranger at my front door a half-century later, a man from the San Francisco Medical Examiner's Office. Little brother, 1973. It's almost the end of the school day in the Head Start program at Maxwell Elementary. Today, they're not offering popcorn balls. I also don't feel like racing our teacher, Mr. Andrews, who's tall, skinny, and blonde, with blue eyes that smile at me above his thick mustache. Here at Maxwell, he's one of the people who makes me feel safe. I'm just excited and want to get home. There's someone waiting for me there, someone I've never met before. Today's our normal routine. Each child gets a back rub during nap time to encourage sleep. I pretend to dream on a small, soft white blanket, waiting for my turn with my eyes fake closed. But I move around too much and can't settle down. I hope the teacher doesn't notice, as I watch him move quietly from kid to kid. My father doesn't trust the school bus yet, so he picks me up in the car, an avocado green Chevy Impala, driving the 3 minutes back to 443 East Road. He likes to have the radio on. It's how I know all the latest hits. Right now, that means Roberta Flack's Killing Me Softly, played just about every hour in the car or on our living room stereo console, and many singers and groups that are either energetic or make me feel like being quiet and sinking into the song. Everything from Deliverance's Dueling Banjos to Rocky Mountain High by John Denver to Love Train by the OJs and Stevie Wonder's Superstition. Like our family, 1970s music is mixed race black and white. As I enter our home, heart thumping fast, a buzzing in my ears, my father's sister Cecilia, we call her Aunt Cecile, has a big smile under her poofy, roller-curled hair as she takes my hand and tells me my new little brother is on my bed. That's okay, I think. I don't mind him being in my room. I'm just happy to meet him. As I creep toward the bed, almost the same height as me, I peek onto the white bedspread and there he is, a tiny blue bundle lying on puffs of fabric. For some reason, my shyness kicks in. I move close and see the sleeping brown face that looks like a soft loaf of warm bread, breath moving gently in and out. I become bold and feel a deep sense of pride and protection, reaching out to make sure the blanket's not too tight around his neck. I used to think having a little brother was like having a pet, I was convinced I could train David to be my baby tiger. In the 1970s and 80s, the shag carpet in our living room makes an easy practice space. I have David crawl on all fours, forward in a circle and back again, practicing for a couple minutes until we both get bored and look for something better to do. That's usually coloring or watching TV. He follows me around, and I have a new friend to play with and keep me company. There's a break in the games once David starts kindergarten at Maxwell Elementary. On his first day, he doesn't know where to go. So he runs back home along a wide street, the sun high above him, and doesn't stop until he's back inside. He's in on the joke when I get glasses in second grade and pretend I have a twin sister to our neighbor down the street, Dee Dee, popping up in my brother's bedroom window, then back down to take them off before coming back up again as me. After the third or fourth time, she says, "That ain't your sister, that's you." When my baby tiger is able to ride a bike, we travel to far-off places a few blocks away, exploring the saw pit wash, where low-end kids would sing, the bus, the B-U-S," as it pulls up to stop on our street. Or the dirt bike road, where the BMXs like the ones we see on TV have competitions we're not allowed to go to. Instead, big kids drive their 10 speeds there. One day, we sneak by to see lots of cameras and tons of teenage girls come out when they film an episode of Chips. They all scream when Eric Estrada pokes his head out of a big trailer. Other times we ride around the neighborhood looking for adventures and places to explore, like crawling inside the sewer drain down the block, or chasing the ice cream truck that seems like it's going way faster than the speed limit. David's favorite spot, though, is sitting on the handlebars of my bike while I steer. It's summertime, and as always during this season, it's all heat and smog, but not so hot that we can't go riding up Flagstone Avenue. As it is to this very day, and in the 1970s, it starts out concrete before a dip ramps down into gravel and dirt. Just beyond the Michaels house where I fell one time and lodged a twig in my right arm. I still have a scar there. Right in the dip, I figure it's a good time to reach into my yellow Lay's potato chip bag. The front wheel buckles and David and I go flying and rolling onto loose rocks and dust. After we make sure we can both still breathe and our limbs are intact, we call it the crash of '79. The name of a book we saw on a shelf in the grocery store. Back at home, Joe's stereo blares more mixed race hits of the day. ELO's Don't Bring Me Down, the Bee Gees' Tragedy, Don't Stop Till You Get Enough by Michael Jackson. The Knack think they're the next Beatles. We don't think the same thing. Our favorite is I Want to Be Your Lover by Prince. We stay up late to watch him gyrate and hair shake on the midnight special. We're not supposed to be up at this hour, but we bring the TV into my room, where we three siblings all shift to make sure the bed doesn't creak too loud. We do the same thing for George Harrison and Paul Simon singing Here Comes the Sun on Saturday Night Live. We managed to get through all of Ruth's. I freak Joe out when he turns to see me sleeping with my eyes open. Still, I'm the older sister, the protector. No one messes with my little brother, I tell the kid down the street, Danye Reese, who's in our backyard one day playing dodgeball. When I see he's clearly cheating and blaming it on David, I punch him in the nose and wrestle him to the ground, trying to show him who runs the show around here. Joe breaks up the fight and steps on the pinky finger of my right hand. It ends up broken, and Danye brags that he did it, to the point of trying to save face and telling his parents about our fight. Kids will be kids, says his father, his way of letting this bygone be bygone, and I manage not to get in trouble. Danye brags, I'm glad I broke your finger. My brother stepped on it, I shoot back. Kids will be kids. The ones in the low end are all brags and swag with a rough edge. I'm not always a nice older sister. At a young age, I'm already low end hard. I keep a mouthful of bad words and dirty pictures hidden in books, and punched David in the nose once for no reason. Doing the same after he wakes me up too early one morning. Another time breaking the potted plant he brings home from kindergarten after he so lovingly tended to it. After we see Return of the Jedi when it comes out in 1983, I start calling David Jabba the Hutt. And I make up a game. If you say David's name enough, it morphs into Jabba. David, 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 Java, 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 Java. He puts up with all of it. Acting out is all part of the low-end culture. For now, we go with the flow. It's a sibling thing. But hidden in the drift are the small nettles that sting, that have to be neutralized, understood, and cultivated, now and with the passing of time. I conveniently get my act together once David's bigger than me. Back at the bus stop at the saw pit wash one day, he's walking up to wait to get to school when a group of little kids start taunting and teasing him and making him cry even though he's double their size. His tough kid peers wonder why he doesn't deliver hood justice and just beat them up. But David explains to them, I'm crying because I don't want to hurt them. There's something deeper going on. We're learning how to translate ribs, barbs, and hurts into something far greater than us. It comes from the New Testament lessons we learn. Turn the other cheek. Love thy neighbor. Blessed are the peacemakers. Before we reject religious dogma altogether. It just doesn't make sense when they talk about peace in church, and there's so much darkness at home. It comes from the lyrics of the songs we absorb. Give peace a chance. Come together. Imagine all the people living life in peace. Lines that ring even louder after John Lennon dies in 1980. David and I go through all of it together as he slowly starts to craft an existence centered on compassion for others, while at the same time not being able to survive without the compassion of others. It's a path we travel that will have many stops, starts, twists, and turns. But first, we have a childhood to finish getting through. Thank you.
Now we have a little microphone adjustment, courtesy of the lovely owner of Bird and Beckett. Thank you.
Really comfortable. Let's do it kind of like that. Yeah, I'm sure, you were at a good distance from it. Now, you're going to just have to, speak up this way. Yeah. Ooh, I can talk on it, too. So we'll try. How did I do it that fast? We'll replicate that over here a little bit. I could have muted this, but that would have been too elegant.
There you go.
So, but we want you to be able to face each other.
It'd be nice if I could do that.
So we want to kind of come this way.
There you go. That's perfect.
What do you think?
I think it's great.
And we don't want people to be unable to see past the microphone, so think about that.
Exactly.
Something's come between you.
This DIY folder.
Oh, yeah. It's a nice folder. You made the manila yourself?
I did.
That's
It's like you
cool.
stapled it.
Oh.
This was hand-loomed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. British Empire had something to do with that. Okay, so I don't think that's going to say something.
Hello? Yeah, it's
Who said
loud.
something?
Okay.
Say something.
Hello,
Work.
my name is Maria Breaux.
I don't think we can hear you.
I don't think, yeah, I think you got,
she may be even muted. So
Okay.
we'll unmute you and turn
Okay.
it on. All right. So let's get that right before they start.
Thank you all.
yeah. Thank you, thank you.
Don't get too over anxious here.
Okay.
Now, so listen to it howl once I take it off.
Do you mind if I take a picture of you all? For posterity?
There you go.
Thank you.
Say test, test, test. Let's hear you, Maria.
Say Jabba the Hutt.
There you go. There you go.
Thank you.
Okay.
All right, maybe that's going to be okay.
Okay.
Hello.
Okay.
That's
Yeah.
great.
Okay.
Thank
So
you.
we'll just dive.
Any feedback, or is that good?
Sounds good. Okay. So we'll get started now.
Oh, all right.
Okay. So my first question, I think that all of us who knew you when we heard about David's killing, I mean, our hearts broke when we heard that news, and we couldn't really imagine. We strained to imagine what you were going through. The intensity of the grief, but also all the other feelings that might be coursing through you, because at least to me, it's such a shock. how it happened, all the different things. And for somebody who was leading a life that was centered on compassion, for him to be killed in that way. And so I wanted to ask, what made you decide to do more than just deal with your grief in the private way that the vast majority of us struggle to deal with. We struggle to handle the loss of our loved one by ourselves, our own with friends. What made you decide that you wanted to embark on this process, commit to writing the intertwined story of David and yourself, and do it in a way that you could, give to others? But what did you hope to gain for yourself from that process of kind of excavating the past, following the trial, composing the book?
Thank you. Well, where do I start? First off, as far as what's in it for me, David died over 2 years ago, and grief is a process, and it's ongoing, and I will be grieving for the rest of my life. The way that I grieve will change, how that feels will change, but there'll be those sudden moments where I cry unexpectedly, sometimes expectedly. If I'm standing in front of his picture, I know that's probably going to make me sad. But I think that's also healing. And coincidentally, the book that I'm reading right now is by David Kessler, and it's called Finding Meaning, the Sixth Stage of Grief. And he lays it out very plainly that we have to feel our emotions. If we're crying 20 years from now, we feel those emotions. If we're crying 40 years from now, if I'm 97 by then we just have to make sure that we are allowing ourselves to let those emotions be emitted, because that's part of the healing process. And so that's part of it for me. And then he talks about making meaning. And I kind of just by default, maybe because David's life was such a life of meaning, it did not take many leaps to get to the point of wanting to heal through that meaning and to continue his mission. And you may have heard, several news stories said that in 2016 he left me a message, and I found it after I went through his messages after his passing and just trying to get as many glimpses and reminders of him as I could. And he said, if I'm ever harmed and unable to speak for myself, forgive the perpetrator and help others forgive that person. And there's a couple different meanings to me for that directive. One is literally help people forgive the perpetrator. And then there's a larger meaning in help others be more compassionate. And I think that everyone has a seed of compassion in them, and that sometimes that seed is covered over by like just thick layers of something, whether that's trauma, anger, some kind of hurt they're overcoming. But I believe in the possibility of everyone. I believe in the possibility of me. It's been a difficult few years. I've seen my own anger rising sometimes, and so self-compassion is a big part of that. So I think in answer to your question, how is this helping me, and how am I putting this into some kind of meaning and purpose? It's helping me heal. It's putting David's words into action, and it is also continuing his work in the way that I know how, which is creatively writing a book and using some of his own words, because he had written a second book based on a tour he did around the country that he called the Compassion Tour, with some of his insights on how he came to do the work that he does. And so, yeah, it's multi-purpose and multifaceted, and I can't imagine doing it any other way.
Yeah. Well, I want to talk in a little bit about maybe some of the particular meanings you've gathered in, like, going back into your past and reconstructing and turning it into a pattern story. I mean, I love the excerpts you read, but one question that I just wanted to think about is what it means to you're writing about somebody who aimed to live with compassion and model that ethic 24/7. But there's also a question about what does it mean to bring his legacy forward in the actual writing. How does it mean to write with compassion? And I think that oftentimes when people praise, quote, honest writing in memoirs, they pair that term, that adjective honest, with the adjective unsparing. as if what it means to be honest is to reveal people in with all their flaws, to not soften things. Um, and I think that the tone of your book, the parts I've read, is very striking to me in that it seems very honest in what it sees. But I get that sense that there's no coldness to it, and so I'm just wondering how do you think about that? What it means to, like, reconstruct these moments, painful moments in your past, or painful episodes that you reconstructed where David's harmed, and to write with that ethic in mind, or is it easy? Is it hard? How is it? Have you tried to do that?
Well, the first thing I think of is, so I met a new writer friend of mine. I asked her that very question, like, how do you write about people who you may be saying negative things about? And she said if they didn't want to be written negatively about, they shouldn't have done those things. Which I thought was funny, but the way that I would filter that is I do think that everyone is a three-dimensional human being, and they have made mistakes. People in my family have made mistakes. I have made plenty of mistakes. And I think that some people are nodding.
Yeah.
And so I think that in order to render someone in their full humanity, it has to have both sides to it. That you have to show the positive and the negative. And there's some negative things that have happened in my family that have impacted David, that have impacted me, but like, so for instance, which I've never heard anyone laugh when I talked about my mom wanting to kill us, but I'll take it, I guess.
Yeah. I think it's just so shocking. It comes out of the blue, because the way you set it up, we don't know what's coming.
Right.
That's at least what I felt.
Yeah, and my mom was extremely loving. She had schizophrenia. She did some scary things, but she was my protector when she wasn't having her schizophrenia. Excuse me, when she wasn't having her episodes. And so, and I think of Javier Zamora, who's like one of my favorite writers now, and he really urges writers to find the joy. Like, where is the joy? It can't just be, even the most difficult stories, it can't be one note. And so, and I think I'm answering the question, but I think
definitely.
the way to do it is just very carefully and seeing people. I think it all comes down to stories. And ironically, maybe not ironically, David, in asking the question about compassion, he really was tapping into people's stories. And a lot of people would sit with him on the bench or stand with him at the corner, and he became this so-called street therapist because he would just listen and listen and listen as people just poured their hearts out to him. Sometimes he wouldn't say a single word, and an hour later they'd say, "Oh, thanks for the conversation." And so I think everyone is the sum of their stories and then some. And so to render someone accurately in a book, or with care in a book, passionately in a book, you have to render their whole story.
Yeah, and I think that so often people want to be heard, and if he's sitting on that bench and actually listening, he doesn't have to say something for people to feel that energy and respond.
Right.
But you talk about kind of being honest and seeing people in all their dimensions. Like when you were writing about your mother or your father, how did you were you kind of mindful about striking this balance about, like, okay, I'm writing about this difficult side. I need to go into this other bag of memories, or there are moments where they're so deeply intertwined where you feel like this is we're seeing the person almost in full now in this moment where the difficult part and the beautiful part are so co-present.
Yes, and I would say that the ability to do that, I'm getting older, and hopefully with the aging process, you mature a little bit. And for years,
Hopefully.
for decades, hopefully with any luck, and for decades, I just hated my father with a passion. And any friend of mine none of them ever thought that I would ever get to a point of forgiving him. But I did, and I know the moment in time I was massively drugged, mind you. But only because I was in the hospital and I was getting like a 90% hysterectomy. And in the middle of this pretty scary experience, I said, I forgive my dad. I don't want to be this vulnerable and not, and have these feelings in me still for this person. And I saw his full humanity as growing up in Jim Crow, Louisiana, being working class, working as a janitor for 20 years in an industrial bakery, and I saw his full humanity. And David had done this years before, and he went through his own process of forgiveness. And so I think, what was the question again?
Those moments where you see people in full, but it sounds like you
Yes,
you
yes.
had this sense like when you let go of that anger or frustration, or that
Yeah.
like the other dimensions in him came to the fore, and you could see those and
Yeah,
appreciate them
and
more
I would
clearly.
say that makes for me the most dynamic writing. Even if I hadn't come to a point, I'm really happy that I have come to a point or got to a point of forgiveness. But no one is, well, this is questionable right now, and this today, literally. But some people are not all evil, even though some of them today are very evil who are making headlines. That's a whole different event for a whole different night. But I think most people are not 100% evil, and if you look under the hood, you're going to find some workings that you didn't expect to see, and you can find their humanity, and you might even remember things, which is my case, remember things they did for you that were actually incredibly compassionate and loving and giving.
Yeah, it's like once you let go of, you forgive them, like these other parts of their story, germinate, become realized in your mind,
Germinate and sometimes become the story.
become the story. Yeah. Okay, I have one or two more questions, but I hope to hear from you guys very very soon. So it's about compassion. So David embarked on this quest to understand fully the meaning of compassion, to live out the life of compassion. Now you've kind of reconstructed, how did he come to write this book? What's in there? How did he live his life when we were not as in touch? Try to fill out his story. You've spoken to people whose lives he touched. I know when you post about this, we get these beautiful testimonials on your Facebook page about people who he helped so much. But what do you think you've started to learn about the nature of compassion, or the workings of compassion, by writing this book or researching the book?
I think I learned two main things. One, just how many people he impacted. Like people coming out of the woodwork who I didn't know. Like someone connected with me who's a good friend now, who was a mentee of his, who was on a spiritual path and seeking his wisdom and was studying Buddhism. Like, now we're good friends. And just the people of Davis and people all over the United States and the stops that he made on his tour, saying, yeah, his presence, we'd never experienced someone like that before, someone just able to be so peaceful and open. So that was one part of it. And another part of it is the things he never told me, which we for many years told each other everything. And in writing the book, I realized there was a point in time where he would tell me things and I would get mad. So he stopped telling me things. And I think those things...
What sort of things had he told you that set you off?
Again, so when my older brother, who is in the book, so I won't give too many things away, but at one point in time, he was diagnosed with HIV. And David called me at work to tell me. And I was young. I said, don't ever call me at work with bad news. And then years later, my mom was about to pass away. And David, I could have made it in time to be with her. And David didn't tell me. I said, why didn't you tell me? He said, because you told me not to call you at work and give you bad news. And so I don't paint I'm also honest about myself in this book, because for a long time I wasn't a very nice person. But so I think what he did was he tried to save me from some of the more painful things. So since interviewing people in Davis, I didn't know that not only was he making use of the Davis shelter system, but he was working there, giving compassion talks. And he would be like a trauma interrupter, if you want to call it that. And if someone was having a meltdown for whatever reason, he would just stand there and they would calm down. And he got paid to do that.
Wow.
And I've learned that he got punched in the face by someone in the shelter, and he was very much a proponent of nonviolence, and he got someone to help instead of fighting back, harkening back to that story at the bus stop. So just these little moments in time, and he never told us that he was assaulted. He never told us. He did tell me at one time that he was getting stopped at least once a year by the police department there because he fit the description. But he eventually became so known that even that stopped for him. And there aren't many black people in Davis. So he became more of like, he became more secretive, or not even secretive, just private. because I think he didn't want to hurt us or make him worry about him too much. And in fact, I didn't know he was sleeping outside until a friend of his told me.
Do you think of that as tied to his desire to be compassionate, or is that more the desire to just to have a kind of sphere of his life that was his own, and that he didn't want to share that with you?
At one point, I thought, was he being prideful? But I don't think so, because it wasn't a secret to the community. They all knew where to find him. I think he didn't want to worry people. That's what I've come to land on after talking to so many people and after seeing how he lived his life. And it was with great intention. And Rob Davis, the former mayor of Davis, had said at one point that there's really no template, not much of a template in the West for what David did. He lived more of his life as a sadhu, someone who intentionally, like an Indian mystic who is revered as being without a home, without possessions, and that's not really something, unless you're in specific circles here, definitely not a mainstream way of honoring someone. And so he was very much in line with that thinking, and the books he read are in line with that lifestyle that he led. And so I think that it was out of protection for us and his family, and it was also just 100% in line with his values.
And to live that life. I mean, I think what you're saying is so true. That like, there's all these other cultures in the world that would, revere him, in a more open way. But in our world, it's such a challenge to our values, most shared values about like, to abandon material possessions as he did in so many ways.
And I want to do a little plug. Kevin Fagan is in the audience, who's a former Chronicle writer. He did a story on David, and if I can paraphrase what Kevin said, that in his 30 years of writing about homelessness, he really only came across one other person like David. That one thing I don't want to do in the book is fetishize homelessness or not explore some of the real issues that come along with being unhoused in the United States, and that David was the exception. And that there are a lot of people, and he was very active in the unhoused community in Davis and was an asset to that community in doing food drives, clothing drives. He was an activist for that community as well. So, Kevin Fagan.
Thank you to the work of journalists and the Chronicle.
I'll say a little something about Maria. I have my own book about homelessness out too, but Maria, I've interviewed hundreds of people who were survivors of murder victims and people who were loved ones of homeless people. I never met anyone who had the same kind of incorporation and calm and just an amazing spirit of compassion that your brother gave. Maria is something special. You stood out in my nearly 50-year career. So thank you for being who you are. I appreciated doing the story about
Thank you. The Lost and the Found is the name of his book. It might be on the shelf here.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to ask one more question, and then we'll go to the audience. This is a question about that first chapter, and you kind of set it up, you structured it around this kind of historical rhyme, which is the rhyme between the paranoia and the threatened violence of your mother, her was coming out of her schizophrenia, and then the end of that is about the kind of schizophrenia of your brother's assailant, which will come knocking on your door decades later. And so that this rhyme kind of seems just astonishing. Like, what are the odds? 1% of people being schizophrenic times 1%. I mean, it's just. But I think that I imagine you've spent a lot of time thinking about that both as a kind of a coincidence. What are the odds? But also, what's the logic by which some people are more vulnerable than others? Or I'm just curious how you understand that, the place of mental illness, or however we want to describe it, in your book, how you're processing it and how you're writing it into the story. Well,
we could spend all night talking about various aspects of that. There's definitely just so many coincidences, and I'll just share one anecdote, and then I'll get back to the other part of the question, which is, so as part of the research on the book, I remembered how decades ago, maybe in the late 90s, there was a group of kids, and some of you may remember this story, who were taken to see Schindler's List and studying the Holocaust for their class, and it was a high school in the Bay Area. And the kids laughed during some of the most disturbing scenes, and the teacher had to explain, you have to understand that these are kids who are growing up day to day, living in trauma in neighborhoods that are unsafe, food insecure, violent, and we've not ever discussed the Holocaust. And so afterward, we had a conversation about it, but we just didn't. They didn't know how to react because of their own daily traumas. And the reason I was looking that up is because David and I, we grew up watching movies and laughing at horrific things like Helter Skelter, which granted is a very cheesy, overblown movie, but we also were not taught to not laugh at inappropriate things. And I looked up what high school that was because I'd forgotten, and it was the high school that years later where the young man who took my brother's life went to in Oakland. And that's just one of many coincidences. And then I thought, okay, maybe this is not as coincidental as I think, because it's a certain socioeconomic class. It is access to educational resources because someone believed in you. It is growing up a person of color in the United States with immigrant parents, or my mom came from Jamaica and my dad was pretty much an immigrant in the United States growing up in Jim Crow. And so I said, oh, well, this is something in common that we have, which sounds incredibly strange, I know, to find commonalities with someone who took your loved one's life. But that's what I kept finding time and time again. And it made it easier to forgive because not only of that socioeconomic similarity, but also because my mom had schizophrenia. And some of the more difficult parts of the trial for me, actually, I stepped out during the more graphic things to protect myself. But when there were expert witnesses talking about schizophrenia, just in very medical, dry terms, that's when I got the most emotional because I thought, oh, wow, yeah, not only is schizophrenia so rare, but then to do violence because of schizophrenia comes from not having someone who knew what the symptoms were, who knew what kind of interventions were needed, wouldn't even know where to go. And I remember there was one of the expert witnesses, which has another coincidence that I could share if you like, where he said, people are lucky if they have someone in their family who know what's going on and can take them to a hospital. And that's me and David with my mom. And it just broke my heart that someone was not helped, and it led to my brother's life and other lives being impacted. And the coincidence there is before David gave up all of his possessions and devoted himself to compassion, he actually thought that he had schizophrenia. And he went to John George Psychiatric Hospital in Oakland, spent a few hours there, and said, no, I'm not like the people here. I think I need to go out and start asking about compassion. The little voice that I hear is actually a purpose. And that day, on the way home, he said, he called his friend, I'm moving to Davis. And the expert witness who brought me to tears was an emergency room doctor at John George Psychiatric Hospital in actually San Leandro. And so to answer your question, yeah, just the oddity of having schizophrenia be a shared experience, centering that experience in a very, very different backgrounds, but also common enough that it makes really strange sense. And then being able to forgive someone based on that. And I must say a caveat, if this young man had been like a white supremacist, or if he had been someone who I didn't understand his story, who showed no understanding, I don't know if I would have been able to so easily forgive. I cannot say. But those are some of the factors and circumstances that have brought me to an easier place of forgiveness.
Yeah, that compassion is kind of unlocked by that realization that you're looking at someone else, and there's kind of a mirror of your own experience.
Or at least maybe a side view, like a side view peripheral vision, not quite a mirror, but
right. Angle.
Okay. To see the back of your hair, the mirror.
So let's open it up to the audience questions that people have for Maria. Yes, Rocky.
Would you speak more about your thoughts on, or David's thoughts on compassion, because I've heard it could be listening, it could be perhaps reframing things for the speaker of here's how to not be consumed by guilt or remorse or something. Let me help create a 3D understanding of where you came from so you can perhaps forgive yourself. That would be one way to be compassionate. Material help could be compassion. And here's a shirt off my back. Food, clothing, housing, etc., transport. Compassion can span a wide range of things. And as a sadhu, I guess, he had a certain inkling of what kind of compassion he wanted, and we haven't been able to read the book yet.
I will say,
just for the people on the Facebook who couldn't
yes.
hear Rocky's question, he was asking about what's the like repertoire of compassion? What are the different ways that it manifests itself, and what have you kind of seen about that repertoire as you've been writing the book?
Well, I will say that David collected tens of thousands of definitions of the word compassion, so it tends to be very individualized. There were some themes that came up, like having empathy for others, having regard for others, walking in someone else's shoes. He had 3 definitions over time. The first one, and he kind of whittled it down over time. The first one was very long and had 4 parts, and it was listening, so active listening, acknowledging, so actually not just pretend you're listening and then looking over there for a second. And then it ended up with acting. So once you acknowledge someone's suffering, recognizing that they're suffering, he felt that the last really important stage was to act, to help alleviate that suffering, even if you couldn't alleviate it altogether. And then his few years after that, it became recognizing essence. And for him, that meant understanding someone's story, like why are they the way they are, given what they've told you about themselves. So not making any assumptions, but basing it on their actual words. And his most recent one, I found out through his mentee, was unconditional love. And that just means no matter who someone is, what they've gone through, how they might be treating you, it doesn't necessarily mean they're your best friend and you hang out with them all the time, but it just means that you love them no matter what, just because of your shared humanity. And that's a hard one for a lot of people. I can't say that I'm that person, but I try to treat everyone with respect. But again, like he was having people think about the question, and in doing that, it opened something up in them. And so it became whatever it was for them that was directed towards someone else or others.
I could hear from. Yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing. It was so beautiful to hear your writing. So beautiful. And,
Thank you.
There's so much I relate to about some of your life journey, but I've been unhoused. I have several mental health diagnoses, and I also am an immigrant who have a lot of coincidences in my life journey and how I got here from a different country, and the work that I do now with the unhoused community and have done. And I talked to Steph about this a lot, just that there's certain sort of decolonial narratives that I hold about people living outdoors and outside of and not participating in capitalism, and that there's so much there that I've witnessed working with communities that people are getting that is so valuable by being outside of this sort of rat race, being around people that whether they don't have their biological family with, they've found family with, they're sharing resources, taking really the village lifestyle, of how people can be in community. That's so beautiful, and but that's one part in that there's sort of, what I'm hearing is sort of the connection between you and David is sort of this elevated consciousness. And I wonder, my question is framed in that, do you have, from a cultural background, some sort of ancestral wisdom that you anticipate is, maybe tied to that, or that you're having any kind of ancestral recall? And the reason I'm asking is because I was just having this conversation with my friend who's a Black trans woman, and I was talking about certain coincidences in my life, and she was like, I actually don't believe in coincidence. And then sort of talking about her sort of inner knowing, and like almost like premonitions of things that happen. And I just thought about that as you were talking about coincidence. So yeah, I'm just curious, like with talking about your parents and being immigrants, like did you ever talk with David about that, or is that something that you think about in relationship to, because it's very clear that your path around this is providing this sort of very expansive, elevated consciousness that you are now delivering this message to the public, and I think that's clearly something that is needing to happen right now, you know, in the world that we're living in. So, yeah.
Well, thank you for that. How do I encapsulate that question? I guess tell me if this is correct, that you're wondering if in doing some of this kind of excavating and going back into the history and elevated consciousness, if there's any ancestral work that's happening as well, and seeing if those coincidences aren't as coincidental as one might think, because maybe those are messages being passed down. My short answer is something's being passed down. I don't know what it is, but I've, like for instance, small things, and I want to be very careful to not talk too much about the other parties impacted, because they're going through their own journey, and I have a lot of love and deep respect for them to not even pretend to tell their story. But one of them teaches agrovoltaics at UC Davis, and that's the study of soil in conjunction with solar panels and what you can do with soil in the shade of solar panels. So he knows a lot about soil, and I still have David's ashes. And I said, we want to do something with David's ashes. I'm waiting for that sign and signal. As I'm going through his diaries, I found that he wanted to be cremated. Luckily, we did that. And now I'm waiting for some kind of knowledge about his ashes. And I learned that, and again, I can do this from the 2-year perspective of having lost David and being more scientific about it now. But I learned that if you have a tree, and I believe David at one point said he wanted to be buried with a tree. I don't know where, but with a tree. So we're getting closer. And I learned that if you dig a hole that's 2 feet down and 2 feet around and bury ashes there, they become organic material again. And so it's like that person is not in the human form, but they are living again through the life of that tree. And so in terms of wisdom being passed around, I think sometimes it's between us. I don't know where the source is or where that originates, but I believe that, and if this becomes too woo-woo, pardon me, but I do believe in dreams, and I believe in listening to those dreams, and even if it's to follow trails, because who knows what the source of that is. I can't say for certain, but I can have a belief in it, just like everyone else has their belief. And if like 70% of American adults can say they're Christian, then this whatever percent of us can say, well, we have this other different knowledge, and it comes from a spiritual realm, and we use that in our day-to-day to help us survive and heal and find meaning. And so that's a longer answer to another answer, yes.
I think we had, okay.
So I'm not quite sure where you're at in your writing process, if you finished a draft, but I'm wondering in writing, did you start out with, okay, here's the spark, here's the story that I'm about to tell, and then as the manuscript comes together, does the story sort of take on its own life? Like you're like, I'm going in this direction, and suddenly the words on the page are like, nope, we're going over here.
Yes.
Okay.
No, so the question was, as you're writing a book, you start out at one point and you find that it kind of veers in different places and it becomes its own thing. Well, I have to give a lot of props to Scout Saul, because you don't remember this, but you're the one who encouraged me to write this book. And we had lunch at Stanford. Your son was in a jazz camp. Yeah. And I said, I'm thinking of doing this thing that's kind of like snapshots from David's life. And you told me, well, that'd be good if you're doing like a photo album to give to your family members, but you really want to do justice to David's life. So I thought, okay, story. And that was the first idea. And then I thought, how am I going to do this? But the short answer is I've been lucky to be in 2 different writing workshops, one at Community of Writers and another through Lighthouse Writers Workshop in Colorado. and just listening to other writers and listening to people who've written before and find out sometimes, and I'm a very nuts and bolts kind of person, like just tell me how to do this. So that's been really helpful for me in terms of story versus making meaning versus maybe bringing in some historical references, especially if I'm bringing in facts about schizophrenia, some of the more clinical things, and figuring out how to weave that. And so now it's become more of like this tapestry of things, at the same time letting things organically become what they will. And Christy, I think, is inside here, my writing coach right there, who helped me form some of those initial concepts and stories. I would recommend anyone who wants to write to get with a really great coach, and Christy's really great. So the answer is, yeah, it starts in one place. And I know different people write in different ways, but for me, it started with an idea and just being flexible, because even though I studied creative writing at like a hoity-toity university, like I have never written a creative nonfiction work before. And so there is a learning curve, and I'm just kind of open to what that road, where that road will bring me.
Me?
Yeah, go for it.
Is there one awareness that going through this process has become more profound for you, or an aha moment, a message, or a consciousness?
I remember long ago and far away sitting with David in the very park where he would eventually lose his life on the other side on a bench. And it was a couple of years after our mom had passed away. And he's the one who he was in San Francisco when my mom passed away, and he's the one who gave me that news. And a couple of years later, he was in Davis. And I was visiting him, and I said, I really miss our mom. And he looked at me, and he said, she's still with you. She's in your DNA. And I was like, don't tell me, I know she's not. She's not here with me right now. And I've come full circle, and I feel David is with me every day in little things. Like we'll laugh about something, and I imagine him laughing at the same thing. I imagine his face. I imagine just him sitting in the room and his really deep chuckle. And he found humor in a lot of different things. And so that was my aha moment, thinking and knowing that we can also make meaning by knowing that we still have love for that person who we've lost. We are still very appreciative of everything they've given us, and he's literally just a memory away. And then I think, well, he was in Davis a lot of the time, so that's not much of a stretch of not being able to hug him, which is a very big, painful thing. But just knowing I've not become so senile that I can't remember a lot of the great things that we shared together. And so those memories are still very much intact.
In the back, then we'll get to you.
When your book is done, is there a hope that you have that we, like me, I'm a man, and it says guy, I know guys can be girls now, and that I might be able to be transformed into a compassionate guy? Because I worked as a nurse for 40 years, retired this year, and I feel like I've lost compassion deeply.
It has a tip sheet at the end. I'm kidding. So as far as process goes, so the reason we're having this reading tonight is because I got a San Francisco Arts Commission grant to develop the book. And so by the end of this year, I am determined to have an initial draft. And then next year is going to be refining and hopefully getting residencies. And also I have a book proposal. So there's this whole like crash course in book publishing that I've been able to take thanks to Unicorn Authors Club and to Jana, who's part of that, and Meenal. I don't know if Meenal's here, but I've gotten a lot of just wonderfully generous resources from the community, and people have gone through this before. And so basically, I want to draft by the end of this year, and then I'm going to start shopping it around to literary agents. And then next year, just go line by line, word by word, and just do a once-over on the entire thing.
On the East Coast, who's my older sister, schizophrenic, and I read a lot and experienced a lot about it. So what you are writing about is also of a high interest to me in other ways. But one final thing, just quickly, is why
Sure.
Davis? Like people go to UC Davis because sometimes they don't get into Cal, or they want the biology knowledge and dirt knowledge. But why did he choose Davis? It's a hot town.
So 2 questions. I would want to get back to your other question. Is there like a roadmap for finding compassion in your life, and why you see Davis? There's not quite a roadmap, but I hope that it does inspire people. That David, what he did was very singular and very unique, and I don't pretend to ask people at the end, hey, give up all your possessions and do what David did. But I was telling a friend of mine recently, even like there's never such a thing as too much compassion. If it's letting someone cut you off on the freeway, or realizing, oh, I'm doing that, I'm getting mad at them because I had a rough day, and having compassion for yourself. So if all of us were just a little bit more compassion, myself included, that can't be a bad thing. And then why Davis? He had a friend who lived there who said, you can sleep on my couch. And so it started as simple as that. But then he stayed there because he found a loving community. And I know I'm an outsider to Davis. I don't live there. But every time I go there, it seems like this magical land of people who say, no, you go first. And when they're parked at a corner, no, you go. No, you go. No, you go. And that may be an idealized view from an outsider, but they have great social services. It's like a college town. There's a lot of intellectual curiosity, very community oriented, and so I can see why that was a very comfortable fit for David, and he made an impact very quickly, and so he found a home there, even if he didn't have a literal house over his head all the time.
Yeah. I wanted to piggyback on the comments about memory, because I was really struck by your first reading of your early memories and how vivid those were. I mean, I grew up in Pasadena, so I know Duarte, and I was like, and then like all the references, but you were so young, and so what was that process to recall those memories or to paint those pictures?
Well, I'd say three things immediately come to mind. Pictures. I have so many photos. And David, he had given up all of his possessions, but then he accumulated things over his 14 years in Davis that he kept in a storage unit. And besides clothes and like computers that didn't work anymore, he kept all of his photographs of our family and our house and the neighborhood. Also, Google Maps is your friend. Street View. And then just imagination and closing one's eyes and just going back to the gate. I can picture the gate that was broken that separated the driveway from the back. I can imagine like the aluminum siding. Like I think just allowing oneself to be mindful of a past experience. Those were the 3 things that I thought of, and a friend of mine just gave me some feedback recently about some of that beginning. I thought, okay, what was it like coming home from a hard day's work in my neighborhood? I remember that damn screen door that would always bang shut. That was so annoying. And I worked that in. And so I think we have memories there if they can just be sparked. And talking to people too, and talking to people and reading books every time. In fact, Kevin Fagan's book, I was reading one of the chapters and all of these memories came back of David. And I just wrote them all down. And I may not use all of them, but just having them all there, that means that's material. So, thank you for the question. It was, how do you access memory? Period.
Maybe just one more question.
Maria, your brother does sound like an incredible person.
Thank you.
Who really embodied compassion. I'm wondering, do you have an early memory of him that kind of augured this like amazing path he was gonna? Did you see an early glimmer of this like compassion being?
Do I have any early memories of knowing that he was going to take this path? I couldn't have predicted it, but once he did that, like the story I shared of him at the bus stop and not wanting, like he was a big kid from a very early age, tall, and bigger than every other kid, but he was always very gentle. I was the one who was beating people up. And he just, I was acting out because I was pretty peaceful at the beginning, and then things happened in my life that caused me to act out. And so I couldn't have predicted it, but it made sense when he went that route. Thank you.
It's not a question, it's a comment. But I'm really afraid I'm remembering this wrong. Did he not visit you your freshman year?
He did.
Yeah. Because I remember seeing the 2 of you together, and it was just very special. You guys giggled a lot. Constantly giggling, and you had inside jokes. It was really, really deep. So that's all. I just want to share that memory.
Thank you. It was a comment of how ridiculous me and David were when we were at Stanford together. He was visiting. He was very, very funny, and that's one of the things that helped us get through our childhood was just 1970s and 80s sitcoms and the humor that we had, sometimes in very inappropriate ways. And I knew actually it was sad the day that he stopped joking as much with me, because he used to, in baby tiger fashion, I'd say, "Hey, David, do that funny dance," and he would do it. And then one day he said, "I don't think I want to do that anymore." And I was like, "Dang it." He's grown up. So thank you for that memory.
Well, I think thank you so much for being here, and a huge thank you to Maria for developing this beautiful book. I know we have everybody here can't wait to read it. And I think there's some like.
Well, there's two more things while I can still talk that I want to say. Three more things. One, I was going to do a printout of like a QR code fancy thing to please donate to this bookstore. Eric Whittington is a treasure, and he opened his doors to us this evening so we could have this reading. So please go to the Bird and Beckett website, hit donate, and please put something in the Bird and Beckett coffer. And I have a blog that I'm giving people updates about the book. It's on Substack, and it's Cinemulatto, which is CINE and then MULATTO. That's tongue-in-cheek. I don't actually refer to myself as that offensive term. But it's Cinemulatto on Substack, and I'll be putting book updates there, and there's snacks as well.
Snacks.
Donate, Cinemulatto, snacks.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Scott.